All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are here for video 3 of exercise 10-1. Just kind of wanted to show one real quick thing before we get going. So in the last video, we finished up the coding for the customer information form. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of jump into just an example real quick. I don't want to keep doing that. So at this point, we actually have everything, so we can save the information, we can exit the form. But one thing I didn't actually show in the last video was our ability to select the form and see the second form. So when you click on select payment, if you remember from the code that we did, let me go ahead and actually back it up just a smidge. We'll view the code, and our, let's see, where is it? Oh, button select, there we go. We created the new form object, we created a dialog result to get the information, and then we put in our label payment information text box to display the tag property of this payment form object. So as of right now, none of this is going to work, but we can do the select payment, and just to show that it does open the other form. So that's just something that I wanted to show. We can click things around on this form, but as of right now, they don't do anything other than the cancels. Yeah, let me just check something real quick. If I click OK, the OK doesn't do anything. Cancels, but that's pretty much it. So, and the reason why that is because we're getting a cancel return from that dialog box. So, that being said, let's go ahead and move into the payment form here. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to go ahead and create the load event for the payment form, which of course when we do that, to do that, all we need to do is double click on the form somewhere where there's not another element. So we're just going to double click out here. And similar to our customer form where we had our customer form where we had loaded the list box there, or the combo box with a couple of default bits of information, we're going to do the same thing here. So if, with our form, let me just make sure I'm on the right screen. Yeah, with our form, the payment form, we have this list here, which is going to hold some different credit card types. We have these, which is going to hold the months and the years. And then we have, we can just do some basic setup here with making sure we have the right things selected and things like that. So, but basically what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and fill up our list box and our combo boxes on here. So we're going to say list credit card type, items, add, and we're going to just add 3 different credit cards, which is going to be Visa, MasterCard, and American Express. You'll notice that actually if you do this you can do this pretty quickly by using the auto kind of complete that Visual Studio has built in. And to do that, whenever you have something like this, so if I did list credit card type, I can just hit tab. And once I hit the period or the dot, it's going to automatically pull up items as kind of the first thing. So I can just hit tab, and then add is going to give me that as well. So I don't have anything else I'm going to add, so we're just going to do that. And then we want to say the list credit card type selected index, not IDEX, index is assigned a value of 0. 0 being the first one, so by default we're going to start with Visa. Then what we're going to do is we're going to create a string array to hold the months. Now, you could do this with a list as well. The text uses a list, so I'm going to go ahead and use a list. So we want to say select a month. And then we're going to just put in the months of the year. And you do not have to do your line breaks at the same point I do. I just figure there's 12 months in the year. One line break every 3 months makes it, or every 4 months makes it pretty easy to read. And if I could type properly, this would go a whole lot better. So there's our array. And then we're going to loop through this array, and we're going to add each element along the way. So we're going to say for each string month in months. So we're just going to say for every, basically for every element that we're going to call month in this array of months, we're going to add this to the expiration month. Again, just items, add, and we're going to add that month. So basically it's just going to go through this, and for each one of these elements in this array, there's 13 elements in an array, it's just going to add that element to our combo box. And then we want to go ahead and do the selected index is assigned 0. So what this is going to do, selected or select a month is going to be our 0th index on this one. So basically whenever we open up this form, it's going to say select a month, and that's going to be the one that's selected. We're going to do the same thing for years, except we want to go ahead and do this kind of dynamically, because you know we want this form to be able to last the test of time, and we just want to give them about 8 years. So what we're doing is we're pointing the current year. We're going to add 8 to that. And then we're going to look at the expiration year. Items.add, select a year. And then for int I is equal to year, I is less than end year, I plus plus. And we're just going to add expiration year, items, add. We're just going to add I. So in the text, they do it a little bit differently. They use a while statement, and we could do that as well. I like to use for statements for things like this. So basically what I'm saying is I'm creating a new integer called I, and it's going to be assigned the value of the current year. This is currently 2023, so that's going to be the value of it. So I'm going to create I and assign it the value of 2023. Then we're going to say I is less than the end year, which could be 2031, which is 8 years from now. And then we're going to increment I. And then I'm going to add I, the value of I, to my expiration year combo box, because I is the value that I'm changing. In the text, it uses year, and it increments year each time. But I want, you know, just because of the way that I like to do things, I'm going to go ahead and use it this way. If you wanted to do it the other way, it would look something like this. Say while year is less than end year, CMB, expiration year, items, add year, and then year plus plus. So very, very similar. Basically does the exact same thing, except this one increments year instead of incrementing another variable. I prefer using for loops for this. However you want to do it is completely up to you. And then again, we want to set the selected index to 0, which will mean that we're going to start again with this select a year, because that was the first element that we added. And we can actually run this up to this point, run this program up to this point, and we can see how everything is working. So here is my form. Let me go ahead and zoom in on that real quick. So I'm going to select a payment. It opens this form. I have my Visa, MasterCard, and American Express with Visa selected. And then I have my expiration date with the month and the year. I can make these boxes a little bit bigger so they could be easier read, and I may do that real quick just so they're there. But whenever I do a drop down, I have all of my months here, and I have all of my years here. 2023 to 2030, that is 8 years. Because if you remember correctly, I did less than the end year being 2031. So that's why I'm only seeing 2030 here. Because once I or year made it to 2020 or 2031 is no longer less than, which means that that loop does not execute at that point. So everything seems to be working as expected up to this point. Oops. Hit the wrong button there. Everything seems to be working up to this point with everything that we have. And everything looks good here still. So now what we want to do is we want to create a we want to create an event handler named for the changing of our billing options here. Because if the billing option is credit card, we want to be able to access all of these other things. If the option is billing the customer, then we want to disable all of these things. So first, let me go ahead and do this, where we're just going to kind of expand this out a little bit, expand that out a little bit, like that. We'll go ahead and we'll expand this just so they look all nice and uniform. Yeah, do it like that. That should give us a little bit more room so we can see those things. If we can't see the entire text, that's fine for this particular example. I think you'll get the idea. So what we want to do is we want to create this event handler for when one of these whenever this gets changed. So there's two ways that you can change a radio, and that is by clicking on it or by clicking on another radio box, a radio button. So let me explain that real quick. As I mentioned before, when you have radio buttons in a group like this, only one of them can be selected at a time, which means that when you select one, it deselects all of the other radio buttons in that grouping. So if I have a credit card and I click on the bill customer, it's going to deselect the credit card, which means it is going to change the credit card checked status. And if I click on credit card, it's going to deselect the bill customer, which means it's going to change the status of that check radio button. So what we want to do, and for this we only need to create one event handler for it, but usually I would create several event handlers and then create another method to handle the change. So what we want to do is we want to add an event handler, and this is a little bit different from how the text says it, but I'm going to go ahead and just do it here on the credit card. So I'm going to double click on that, and it's going to give me a checked changed event handler. And what we want to do is if the credit card is checked, we want to enable all of the other forms, and if it's not checked, we want to disable all of the forms. And that's going to be pretty easy to do like this. So if rad credit card checked, now the text I believe often has it as is equal to true. That's not necessary. You can do it that way if it's easier for you to read, but just remember that credit card rad radio buttons dot checked properties, just like the checkboxes, that is a true or false property. So you can just leave it like this: if rad credit card dot checked, and that's going to be true or false. You don't have to do anything else. But we're going to do enable controls as a method, and then we're going to say disable controls as a second method, and those are going to enable our controls or disable our controls based on whether or not the credit card is checked. Because like I said, if the credit card option is checked, we want to be able to use the elements on the form. If not, then we don't. So the next thing that we're going to do real quick is just create those enable control and disable control methods. So private void enable controls, and you could do this kind of stuff before creating this event handler, and that would keep you from having red lines and stuff. Just for the sake of it, I'm just going to go ahead and do it now. So we have list credit card type. We want that enabled. We want the TXT credit card number enabled is true. We want the combo box for the month enabled is true, and the combo box for the year enabled is true. I think that is all of them. We're going to go ahead and leave the default payment checkbox there because I don't think we need to see that. And I think that's pretty much it. So now we want to do a private void disable controls. And I'm going to do this a quick and easy way. We're just going to go ahead and highlight, copy, paste. And then I'm going to come up here and I'm going to change this one to false, copy that, and then false, false, false. Whoops, that was not what I wanted. False. All right, so now enable controls enables all of our form elements and disable controls disables them all. So let me go ahead and run this real quick just to make sure everything is working. I don't know why it keeps opening on the wrong screen. So when we go to save, not save, select payment, we have all this. Right now we are on credit card. So when we change to bill customer, that is going to change the status of the credit card, which means that it's going to kick off this credit card checked change or change check or whatever it's called, check changed event handler, and it's going to look to see if the credit card radio button is checked. If it is, it's going to enable all of these, and if it is not, it's going to disable them all. So let's try that by just clicking on Bill Customer, and you'll notice that everything got grayed out, and I can no longer select anything here. That means everything is disabled. I can still set it as a default billing method, but I can't change anything else. So whenever I click on Credit Card again, everything is now re-enabled, and I can click on any of these values and change any of these. So that's how doing an enabled or disabled works, and that's how radio buttons work. So the next thing we want to do is we just want to go ahead and we want to validate the data and save the data and pass that data back to the form. So let's go ahead and we'll create a private bool called isValidData. And again, for now, just for testing, I'm going to return true. And then we're going to say have a private void save data like that. Okay. So now let me go look for these real quick. Okay, so again, let's go ahead and do the data validation first. I think that'll be the one that'll probably take us a longer time to get rid of or get through. But again, what we're going to do is we're just going to check to see if RAD credit card checked. Because if you think about this, if we have all of the other elements disabled because we're not using them, then we don't have to worry about whether or not the data is valid. We can just skip over that and we can just return it and say, yes, sure, the data is valid because we don't have any data to validate. So we're only doing this if we're using a credit card. And then what we want to do is we want to check the list credit card type, selected index. If that is -1, which is what it starts as a default, again, we're just going to do a message box show. And we're going to say, you must select a credit card type with, we'll say credit card error. And then we're going to go ahead and put the focus on the credit card. And we're going to return false. I'm not going to go over all of that again. Just remember, once we get to a false, it returns from there, and the rest of the function is skipped. We're going to check our card number and make sure that that's not empty. Let me just make sure I'm on the right screen. I am on the wrong screen again. I am so sorry about that. So we're doing an isValidData. We have a saved data. And we're just going to, we've checked for the credit card being checked, and the selected index is -1. And we're going to now move on to the credit card number text. To check the credit card number text, we're just going to check for an empty string. And just like before, we're just going to show them a message box that says something like, you must enter a credit card number. Now, again, the way that we've been doing things with our assignments has been to try to get all of our error messages at once and send them back. That's not the way that he does things here in his text. So just so you know, if we were doing this as part of an assignment, then we would want to create a message for all of these, send that entire message back, and display an entire message. I would use a Boolean/string tuple, as I've done in previous examples, where I would set it to false. The first part of the Boolean string tuple, I would set that to false, and then I would send the message back, and then I would display the entire message at once. For the purposes of this, we're just going to display one message at a time. And then we're just going to check the two selected index is equal to 0. The two expiration date items, which is just going to be, you must select a month. Month entry error. No, guess I've been doing caps like that. CMB expiration month focus. Return false. And we'll finish it off with the year. Now remember with these, since we have a default selected index of 0 because we have the select a year or select a month, that's why we're checking for a selected index of 0 instead of -1, because we set it to 0 by default. So you must select a year, and year entry error, CMB expiration year focus, return false. So I believe if we look at our form, the payment design here, if we look at our form, the only ones that we can be missing are the credit card type, the credit card number, expiration date, month and year, and if we're only checking those if we are using a credit card. If we are not using a credit card, if we're billing the customer, we're skipping all of those. This set default can be either yes or no, so we can leave that as is. We don't need to do any checking on that. Let me clear out some of these messages real quick. If all of these items are skipped, or if we are not using the credit card, then we're going to return true. And that's pretty much all that there is to the validate data. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run this real quick. Move you over here like so. And we're going to switch my zoom to that. Boy, so we're going to select a payment. If I try to OK this now, nothing's going to happen because I actually don't have anything set to OK. So I need to create an event handler for that. So like that. And just like our event handler before, we're going to say if is valid data. We're going to save the data. So now, and for now, we'll just say message box show data saved. Let's go back to this. Okay, we're on center zoom. We'll go to select payment. If I try to OK this, you must enter a credit card number. You must select a month. You must select a year. Everything is OK. Data saved. We did do, I thought we did a credit card type was defaulted to -1, but maybe not. Let me try and see that real quick. Oh, I did one here. I want that as, we'll set that as -1 because we don't want to have a default credit card. I think the text has it as 1. We're going to leave it as -1. I'll try it one more time, select payment, and now whenever I try to OK, you must enter a credit card type. Okay, so everything is working as expected now. Okay, so now we have valid data, we have an accept click, and let me just make sure that we have everything else that I need before we move on to the final step. Yep, I think so. Okay. So the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to write the save data method. And the save data method is what that's going to do is it's going to create a string for us that we're going to send back to the original form. And when we do that, it's going to when we send it back, it's going to say that it's that's going to populate our payment label. So, and I think once I get everything set up, I think we'll be able to see what that does. So what I want to do is I'm going to start with a string that I'm going to call message, and we're going to assign an initial value of an empty string. Then what I want to do is I want to say if the credit card is checked, I want to present some information that I get from the form. So what we're going to do is we're going to say if the RAD credit card checked, I want to go ahead and I'm going to add a message to this. And there's a couple different ways that we can do this. Personally, I would probably actually use like a string builder here and just append the information. They just use one big long string here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say string.format, and I'm going to say change to credit card, card. A couple extra lines there. And there's a card type. And I'm going to get the card type from the form. That's not what I wanted. Okay, card number, again, getting that from the form. Now, one thing that we're not going to do in this one, I did this in last week's, I think it was last week's homework, is validating the credit, the number to the account number. We're not going to worry about doing that. That's just an awful lot of extra work to do. Not really necessary for this assignment, for this example. And then we want to go ahead and we're going to do list.text. So that's going to get the text from the selected item. We're going to get the card numbers text. We're going to get the CMB text and CMB year.text. So what those elements, or what those items do, is it gets the selected text from the list box and the combo boxes. And that's really kind of easy to use that way. That way we don't have to worry about trying to translate a selected index and everything else. So just one thing that we can do there. And then if the credit card is not checked, which means that our billing, our customer billing, we're going to say message is send bill to customer. And that's going to be the entirety of the message if we already have that. We're going to create a boolean that it says is default billing, and we're going to assign that to the checkbox that we have. And it's just going to be whether or not it's checked or not. And then we're going to add that message to the end. So string.format, default billing, and is default billing. So now that we have all of that, basically what this last one does is it just takes that checkbox that's on there. If it is, if it says that it is, if it says that it's good, then, or if it says that it is checked, it's going to be true. If it's not checked, it's going to be false. Then we're going to say this dot tag is assigned the value of the message. So all of the string together, whatever we get, whether it's the credit card or the billing, we're going to take all that information and assign it to the tag. Now, if you remember correctly, from the payment for the customer, we set, where did it go? We set the label payment info text to the tag property of the payment form. So when we use this tag, and this is just a keyword that says this is the tag that belongs to this class or this object. When we set that message to the tag, whenever we access the tag from the other form, we're going to be able to get the information from that. And then this dot dialog result is assigned the value of dialog result. Okay. Now I need to go back and double check something, because I think what we want here is actually okay and not yes. Yes and okay are different. And I think that's pretty much all that we need from here. I think when we change the dialog result to okay, I think that actually closes our form. So let's go ahead and run this. Get this in the right screen. Zoom in. We want to select a payment. We're going to go ahead and do a Visa with a card number of 12345. We're going to go ahead and say January 2024 is our expiration. We're going to set that as the default billing and click OK. It's going to tell us that our data is saved because I didn't remove that dialog, that message box. And then you'll notice that it does return us back to our original form, but you'll notice some things that are kind of what we need to fix here. So we have a customer name that's still empty, but we now have a payment method information. So we have this change to credit card. Card type is Visa. Credit card number is 12345. Expiration date gets cut off though. So what we're going to need to do is we're just going to kind of need to adjust the size of some things. Probably one of the things that we can alter here. Let me go ahead and we'll do this. One thing that we can do is we can kind of extend this out a little bit. Just kind of move things over like that. And then we're going to expand this. And then while we're here, I'll go ahead and we'll use a smaller font for this. Oops, that's not the right one. Font. I have an Arial 12 point on there for now. I'm going to we'll say an Arial 10 point for that box. All right. So now let's go ahead and run it again. So now we will select payment. We're going to do a Visa 12345. That expires January 23rd, 2023. Data saved. Okay, and now we have changed to credit card. The Visa type is there, the credit card number is there, the expiration date is there, and the billing information is there. When you try to exit, okay, we're evidently running into a problem here because it should not have allowed us to exit without having a name. So I'm also supposed to be adding a event handler. Let me just make sure I'm on the right screen here. I am not even on the right screen. Okay. So I checked over all of my code. One thing that I forgot is there is an event handler that's supposed to be on the customer form in the payment info label, that if that is changed, is data saved is supposed to be false. That was my issue. So now let me go ahead back and run this again. And we're going to go ahead and do this. So now I'm going to go ahead and select a payment. We're going to do a MasterCard this time, 12345. And we're going to do January 2024. We'll set it as default. And OK. Data is saved. Information is here. But now whenever I go to exit, still didn't work. Oh, that's not supposed to be click. It's supposed to be changed. OK, let me go ahead and move this again. So what we actually are going to do here is text changed. We're going to say that one. Now, it's not really going to make sense because it says click, but it will also work for change. Actually, I'll go ahead and I'll remove it from the click. Like that. Now let's try this one more time. Move you over here in center and center zoom. Select payment. Okay. Now since this has been changed, that should not work. Okay, I have unsaved data. Do I want to save it? No, I don't want to save it. Now, and it should also be giving me an issue for having a name that's not in there, so I'm not sure what's going up with that issue. Is data saved files? Because this should say is valid data, and the is valid data happens when you click save. It should also happen when you click yes. Okay, so, it's because if I don't want to save it, then it's not going to be a problem. So as I run it again, we do it this way. We're going to select the payment. We'll do all these things like we did before. And when you come back, if I try to save it now I need to select a customer. Okay, that's where I was messing up. And then all this should be working still. There we go. Now everything is back. Now whenever I go to save it, everything is going to work, and it closes the form. Okay, so I think I got through all of that now. All that should be working as expected. It took a little bit longer to get working than I thought it would. But that's pretty much it for what we need from this. I apologize for the last like 10 minutes or so of confusion. So I will, but that is basically what we're looking at. So hopefully you weren't too confused by that last 10 minutes, and I apologize if you were. But basically everything from here is, you know, I think it's mostly self-explanatory, I think, as to what a lot of it is doing. I'm just using the error checking and stuff like that we've done before. The only difference is now we're kind of sending information back and forth between two different forms. So we have this tag, which allows us to kind of send information back from this form to the other form, because we do have this this object that's going to maintain that information. So I hope that helps. Again, these videos have been a lot longer than I was normally planning them to be. We're at about an hour and a half now for all three of them. So again, I really hope that this helps. I apologize for some of the technical issues and some of my coding issues, but we will call that a video series, and I will come back with 10-2, where I hope it'll be a lot less lengthy than this one. So take care and best of luck.